Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another fantastic Chuck Jones Creativeside chat. It feels like it's been forever. And back to July. Months just turn into years, turn into meaningless time, and it has been a long time. But tonight it's serendipitous, really, because tonight is the third show that I have with the legendary Larry Leichliter, which I like to affectionately call L3, right? Because it's three L's. And then we're just going to go L3 cubed tonight because L3 cubed is my third show with the legendary Larry Leichliter. So I love this guy's work. Not only is he a talented, brilliant creative who's won an Emmy, which I don't even know if we've seen the Emmy yet, but we're gonna have to see the Emmy. Maybe we can see the Emmy at some point. Not only has he won numerous awards, he's gotten to work with legendary people, he's created legendary work, but he's also a super cool guy. So what's reaffirming about all this is you have an insanely talented individual who's also just a cool person, and we get to hang out with L3 tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a ton of stuff to work through on fabulous artwork, wonderful stories. I can't wait to get to it. So let's not pause any further. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Larry Leichliter, L3 cubed tonight. Larry, welcome to the Chuck Jones Creativeside chat. I will give the applause for you.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Hi, and welcome to autumn in the Midwest.
Yeah.
The past few weeks, it's just been the air is like full of falling leaves, drifting and flying around like birds. But now they've all shifted to the ground, and the lawns are covered, and the streets are lined with leaves, and they're all bunched up against the front door steps and the garage door and everything, and I haven't told anybody this except maybe my wife, but my first one of my early memories was of reading a story about maple syrup harvesting, and I could just, in reading the story, I could picture myself walking behind, this big draft horse hauling a sled full of cans and pegging them to trees and collecting the sap and taking it to a cabin out in the woods to cook down to maple syrup. And it all seemed really familiar to me when I was a little kid, but I grew up in Southern California, so it seems kind of odd. It wasn't until much later that I learned that my family was from Pennsylvania. But as a kid, I felt like I belonged somewhere where it snowed in the winter. And now here I am, and it snows in the winter, and I love it. And all the people, my neighbors and stuff, they think I'm crazy because I tell them that I love the snow. Anyway, it just seems right where seasons look and feel the way they're supposed to. You know what I mean?
Go ahead.
So everyone's out, gathering up leaves, and most of them are using blowers or these little tractors with vacuum cleaners on them, sucking them up. But I like raking them, and my next door neighbor likes raking them too. He rakes them up into a big pile, and then he burns them, and I sort of watch tentatively to hope that the wind blows it away from my house. Yeah. But that brings us to the new piece that we've done for tonight, which is Linus jumping into a pile of leaves. And there are three things about this moment that I really like, and that sort of made me want to try and recreate it and share it with you. And the first one, oddly enough, is The scene starts with Snoopy on all fours, blowing this leaf to add to the pile. He's helping Charlie Brown pile up this pile of leaves. And there's something about seeing Snoopy walking on all fours, which you don't see very often, but there's something about seeing him that way that I just really love, because it reminds me he's a dog. He's just this puppy. When you see him most of the time, he's standing upright and he's acting like one of the kids, and he's maybe smart, a bit of a wise guy, but he's a free spirit. And when I see him on all fours, it just reminds me that beneath it all, he's a puppy, and I love that. I love the contrast. So the next thing is the idea of jumping into a pile of leaves. I mean, if there's anything that's evocative of the joys of the season, it's being a kid and jumping into a pile of leaves, which is not something I've ever done. I don't know about you, but
oh yes, many times.
Yeah, did you?
So
that doesn't surprise me, Dan.
Well, believe it or not, but I'm down in Florida now, so fall doesn't exist, which I'm okay with. It was 80 degrees today. It'll be 80 degrees tomorrow. You know what it was back in Illinois tomorrow? Yeah. It's gonna be 30. I don't need 30. So, but when I would rake in my neighbor, because we had giant trees, and even when I was a kid, we would do the same thing and jump in, and my kids have done it. And last year was my last year of raking giant piles of leaves. So now we only have like 1 week of fall up north, right? It's 1 week of fall. It goes summer, fall, winter, bam, done. And that's it. So you better get in those leaves quick. So this thing that this wonderful piece that we're going to debut tonight in the watching the sequences is, to me, like, I could relive that moment, and instead of it lasting a week, it could last as long. It hangs on the wall and it could last a lifetime. So why don't you take us to what I love watching the sequence of things and like how you develop stuff. I'm always been intrigued by that. I've got production drawings all over the place. Those to me are absolutely fascinating. And in our pre-production meeting, I thought it was like, I love the story of how you were developing this, and I love the fact that we actually have the images. So L3, could you take us through this start on how, like, you get it all out there, and then here's how we get it down to the final piece. I love the process. I'm gonna hand it over to you. Take us through it.
Thanks, Ben. But first of all, you really did jump into a pile of leaves? Because I'm not sure I'd have the nerve to.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. Well, I didn't like getting sand in my trunks to begin with.
True. All right. I'll qualify it with this. There's two types of leaf piles. Okay. There's the leaf pile that comes out of the front yard trees, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a leaf pile that comes out of the backyard trees. We don't jump into the pile from the backyard trees, and I'll explain why. The front yard trees are all these big trees, and you gather them all in, you just jump in. Like it's a blast. It's a giant pile. The backyard trees, well, the dogs have playground in the backyard, and I'm not saying things are messy back there, but you never know what might get scooped up. We don't jump in the backyard leaves, but we do jump in the front yard leaves. So to qualify that, I did it as a kid. I still did it as an adult. I did it last year. And then you bury the kids. Oh my goodness, it's awesome. Now I got jeans on, but still. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Thanks for the warning. I will not jump into the backyard.
Yes.
Okay, so with regard to the, I'd like to share some of the preliminary sketches that we did to lead up to the final piece. And the first one, which you'll see there on the screen, it was a long pan with about 6 images of Linus. And I have to explain that as an animator, I just really love seeing motion played out on a screen like this. I once saw an image of Fred Astaire doing a dance move in multiple images across a long pan, and it was just fascinating. And I could tell you other examples that I've seen that have sort of kept me interested in this, but I thought I'd share with you, in addition to this, one of the early drawings that we did, one of the early limited editions we did, was an image of Snoopy as the flying ace, pursued by the Red Baron. And if I show you this drawing, you wouldn't recognize what it was from the original, because this idea initially was going to be 16.5 inches across by approximately 32 inches tall. And it had all of these drawings around, little thumbnail drawings, and it had 3 color images of the various stages of the dogfight. And I did it with a whole bunch of little Post-it notes like this, and I had them all posted up, and I presented this, and Sandy looked at me and she said, "Think about the wall space that would take." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right. Where would I hang that?" Well, so we narrowed it down and eventually came up with the one we had. So I thought maybe you'd enjoy seeing some of the various stages that this one went through, because I haven't completely learned my lesson. I still start out with these huge ideas, and then
So can I just say something real quick? I don't think I ever want you to learn that lesson. I just
Thanks,
keep
Ben.
doing this and let it keep, because if Scott Dickin, if that's available, and can I just buy that and frame it with all the Post-it notes, that would be super awesome. So Larry, please don't learn your lesson. Okay, go ahead.
It's about 4 pages of Post-it notes. It's quite a lot. Okay, so from this, we worked it down. I eliminated a couple of the poses, and we came up with the next idea, which was 4 poses, still kind of a long pan. And you can still see kind of the flow of the movement. If you follow either Linus's head or the sucker, you'll see how he kind of flows in this wave as he antics down and runs across and leaps up and then drops into the leaf pile. And that's what fascinates me about this whole idea of presenting a moving image on a still frame. So that's where I start, and then I have to get realistic and start working it down and saying, well, what is the essence of this moment? And so we take it to the next stage, which is still 3 poses, but you get the idea. He's sitting there at the tree, leaning against the tree, and at this point you'll see that I changed the pose a bit so that there's more of a curve to his pose. His shoulders are actually leaning against the tree, and he looks a lot less stiff than he did in the original drawing. And then also I had to accept the fact that I'm going to have to draw those leaves in that leaf pile, so I might as well get started on it. So I started cleaning up the characters, and I fleshed out the leaf pile and did a little work on the background. But in the next drawing, you'll see it's the same one, because by this time I'm certain that they're going to buy this, that they're really going to love this idea. So I've cleaned up the characters, and I've started modifying the background a bit. I'm trying to keep to Schultz's style of drawing. but I want to make it more interesting. So there's, there's like a wave, the horizon isn't flat, and the buildings in the background are turned to give it a little more dimension. And, the background is as interesting as the characters are to me at this point. However, we discovered that we're kind of low on one particular kind of paint for Linus's shirt. So we decided maybe we should just narrow it down to the single pose of Linus jumping into the leaf pile, which is how we came up with that final image. And to satisfy my urge to really present you with the whole moment, all of the story to this, I decided to do a little storyboard to accompany it, which works in all those poses that I had done, so nothing went to waste. It starts out with Charlie Brown and Snoopy. They've just finished putting together the leaf pile, and then you can see Linus looking at the leaf pile and running across, jumping in, an explosion of leaves. And the final element that I love about this scene, Linus's punchline. Linus, Linus has always been my favorite character, and much for the same reason that everybody likes Snoopy. I mean, Snoopy's a dog, but he's really smart, and he does all this stuff. Well, Linus is just this really smart kid, but he sucks his thumb, and he's got a security blanket and writes letters to the Great Pumpkin. I mean, he's a kid, but he's Charlie Brown's best friend and really loyal, gives him good advice, and he's got some pretty sage things to say, and I think that all of the characters in the strip were at one time or another a mouthpiece for Charles Schulz to kind of give you his wry view of life. And I think Linus, more than any of the rest of them, got some of Schultz's best lines. So there he is, and he says, "Never jump into a pile of leaves with a wet sucker, and you can make of it what you will." I don't know.
Yes, that it has applications beyond just a sucker pile of leaves. Yeah. So you brought up something interesting, and with in the age that we're in digital and all this kind of stuff, you mentioned that running low on paint for Linus's colors, it's super specific what you need to do, and everything's color coded and has to be made and shipped, and we've got all kinds of supply chain issues. Do you find that where we're at now, makes it a little bit more, maybe difficult's the word, but like you got to rethink things?
Yeah, and we do. Just sort of take it as it comes. But it's part of making something by hand and presenting you with something that is individual. And each of these is inked by hand. And at this point, I need to make a pitch for the guy that does the inking for our show. He also inks for Disney. I hope I'm not violating anybody's privacy, but
you haven't said his name, so you're fine.
There is a documentary about Mickey Mouse coming up on the Disney Channel, and he's going to be in it. So if you see that, you'll see him.
Well, and you know what? What's fascinating too about this process is I love the traditional mediums, right? Digital's great and all that kind of good stuff, but like I love the traditional mediums. Yeah. And the last film to be inked and painted was The Little Mermaid from Disney.
Yeah.
and that was 1989. So good
Yeah.
night. Think of how far, or how long ago that was, and how far things have developed. So to get back into these and to have specific, everything has their specific codes, and you got to have paint mixed a certain way, and it's very specific. So I love the ink and paint process. I think it's a phenomenal art form. I love these kind of things where you take a drawing, look at what you've done, and then we turn it into this piece. So I think it's a phenomenal art form, and I'm so glad that you guys do these things, because I think it's very important.
Yeah, and I agree, and it's a treat working with some very skilled and very professional artists. The painter that has been working on this particular piece, as is often the case, catches mistakes that I might make, and it's like having another set of eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I love the fact that you did this all in a storyboard piece. Thank you for satisfying your need.
Well, there's one more thing that I wanted to say, and that is the one thing that's missing from this was the thing that started me on it, which was seeing Snoopy on all fours. So there he is. This is the beginning of the sequence where Snoopy is catching this leaf as it falls from the tree and blowing it across to then land on top of the leaf pile. And
so for everyone this evening, this was part of the gift with purchase, is that
right.
Larry's hand is going to fall off because of how many he may need to draw in order to fulfill everyone's desires.
Well, I hope so.
Yes, the gift with purchase tonight is Larry does this sketch, and with a dedication for you, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I want to say, this whole thing started when I would come to the gallery and talk to the people that buy this artwork and that really love this artwork as much as I do. As we're talking, I would be drawing sketches based on what we were talking about, whatever their questions might be or any of that. And inevitably, whoever I was talking to would ask me, can I have that drawing? And I ordinarily I wouldn't mind, except that my rough drawings are just so ugly that I hate to give them to people that they're going to show to their friends as something that they think is really great, because I think it's a piece of something that should be wadded up and thrown in the trash.
However, 1 second,
Yeah.
beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Your rough sketches are Picasso.
Yeah.
So, like, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm just gonna tell you, they're friggin' awesome. So, anyway, go ahead.
Well, anyway, so to ease my conscience, because it bothered me that people wanted this, but I couldn't bring myself to let them have it. I talked to Sandy about it, and we came up with the idea that I could make a drawing that that I could do on my own, and it would still be an individual drawing that I would sign and dedicate to anybody that was part of this. So that's how this whole thing started, and we've done dozens and dozens of them over the years. So this is the newest one.
I love it. What? Hold on. I love it. So we're gonna show this final piece, and what I just wanted to mention was, this is your tribute to Sparky, right?
Absolutely.
And what, having him on all fours, like this I love the story that you just told, and when we were talking about this in pre-production, like, this is something special for you and something that you remember as a kid or younger, right, when you're
absolutely.
And so like the fact that you're able to bring that forward now and do a piece is not only a tribute to Charles, but it's a tribute to you and your childhood as well. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, it's a treat for me. It really is.
Yes.
It's a privilege.
So what we wanted to do then was show like what this final piece looks like. So we have the storyboard, right, that comes with the limited, which is awesome. And I love that you've got the gift with purchase sketch that kicks off this whole thing. And Mr. Ryder, can you show us the newly released? Everyone's seeing this for the first time. It hasn't been released yet. It's being released right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here it comes, Mr. Ryder. There it is. Come on. L3.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it looks like fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I've done that with
the
the sucker. I haven't done it with the sucker, but I have done the leaf jump. I love this piece. I love what you did with the back. I love, first of all, like watching the process of it all and how you get down to the final image. Again, I nerd out on that stuff. Like I really appreciate, you know, watching somebody's process and how they develop. Like, why did you do that? Okay, well, why did you shrink that down? And then when you got into the background of things, you kept it simple, but you have a dimension to it. And I think the whole piece, for one, it's nostalgic for me because I've done this. And, you know, so I felt like Linus right there. And just the whole composition of the piece is amazing. And that background for like I'm a huge Maurice Noble fan, you know, and Maurice was like, if his theory on design and how design works with your main action, and you just everything complements what's going on in the front. And I think you just did an outstanding job on this piece.
Oh, well, thank you. That's yeah, I am also a big fan of Maurice.
So we've got it's chuckjonescatalog.com. I think I know it's that. We've got this piece up there, so you can check that out. Obviously ask your consultant. And then we've got the gift with purchase now, L3.
Yeah,
we discussed like we love in person. There it is. So that's a long it's a long URL.
wow.
But it's right up there on chuckjonescatalog.com. It's top loaded, super easy to find. So we like the in-person. We love this because we can reach a lot of people all over the place, and you know, trying to mix that virtual with an in-person thing. So here's what I want to tell for everybody. Tonight, we like with the updates to Zoom and what we're able to do, we can actually bring you in from an attendee to ask a question in the panelist form, and then we can put you right back in the attendee room so that you can still watch, but you can actually, instead of just piping your question to me, which you can do if you would like, and I would be more than happy to ask the legendary Larry Leichliter anything that you want. Or if you would like, all you have to do is raise your hand, and so hit the little hand thing. Scott Ryder will see that. We'll queue up some questions on some things. We'll bring you into the room to go face to face with L3, and then you can.
Oh, that'd be great. That would make me so happy.
See, I got you, buddy. I got you. We talked about it and we're doing it. So yeah, absolutely. So tonight, if you would like to ask, if you would like to come on face to face with Sir Larry, look, I'm just adding titles to you. Put your hand up in Zoom. We'll pop that on. I'll see that. I'll get to some good spots here for questions, and then we will go ahead and bring you right in. So
here, now that I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Where do I get a blazer like that?
So interesting enough, I'm pretty sure this was the discount rack at Macy's or something. And to give you the 45-second version, back up in Illinois, I was a big part of the business chamber, and I would host our annual galas and stuff like that. So I'm on stage and doing whatever I'm doing, and it's a black tie event.
Oh yeah,
Larry, you can imagine I don't wear black ties. So what I would do is, this would probably be the getup, you know, with all the rings and all the jewelry and stuff like that. And so I would wear, this was a jacket, a blazer that I wore for one of our galas that I got up, and it was very splashy with color and stuff. And I'm like, done. So I would be more, I'm a 44 long.
Outstanding.
I don't know what size you are, but if we're comparable, I will send one to you. So you just let me know. I wanted to be fancy for you tonight because I saw you get on. You looked very dapper, and I love, you know, my Chuck Jones t-shirt. And I'm like, we're gonna have to compliment the t-shirt with something because I need to get to the L3 level. After all, this is L3 cubed. So
Oh, yeah.
this is tonight for you, buddy.
Thank
I
you.
went all I haven't worn this jacket in forever. As I told you, the button fits a little tighter.
Oh, looks
so-
good on you. First class.
As long as we can just see from here up, we're good.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got a question in, and it's, how do you decide which key moment to create for a storyboard?
Well, you know, it's not as hard as you might think. If you, well, for instance, look at that long pan of 6 drawings of Linus jumping into the leaf pile, and we distilled it down to the one, but actually 3. You know, the first one where he sees the leaf pile, and then when he goes running, and then he jumps up in the air and he's about to land in it, and then the explosion, of course. So, you know, it's a storyboard is just the way that you tell the story through those individual moments that really do make up that action.
So great question. Yeah, I do love, you know, it's fun to see, especially, you know, when you're going through things, like you're writing things down, or you know, making little notes, you do little thumbnails. Obviously we saw with the dog fight, right? Look at the glory of that piece and how you just, maybe I'm going to do this. So I think you're dead on. Love the process on it, which brings me into, you know, there's certain things, you know, if you don't know, Larry is a legendary animator, and in conversations I have with legendary animators, which would right now be 2, you and Eric Goldberg, but hey, that right there is that's the mantle. So I found something very interesting, and it was something that Eric had mentioned as well, and you said the same thing when we were doing our pre-production meeting. And with all the work that you did with Bill Melendez and the studios and the amazing animators that you worked with and the guys that you had just such an affinity for, you could tell styles just by watching like the finished product. I'm not even talking about the roughs. You could watch, and I find that absolutely fascinating, because Eric had mentioned the same thing when they were working together. And I know, like, in conversations that we've had with Linda, you know, and her talks with Chuck's animators and their unit, and just how you could see those things. Talk to me a little bit about, you know, because they're asked, you know, there was a great question on how do you decide for a key moment in storyboard. Well, when you're looking at those moments that other animators are doing, like, what is it about that catches you that you're like, it's Bill Littlejohn?
Yeah, you know, that's really a good point, because interestingly enough, Chuck Jones was the first animator that I was able to identify in that way, because his work was so unique. You know, when he came along, and he wasn't the only one that did this, but he was the first one that I realized this. When he came along, he changed everything. You know, his sense of timing, his way of drawing, and ultimately his way of animating were all very descriptive to his style, and could be recognized separate from anybody else. And once I realized that I could spot Chuck Jones' animation, and this was when he was, you know, just even before he was a director for Warner Brothers, he was an animator working for, I'm not sure, either Tex Avery or Bob McKimson, but his style of drawing, and especially when he became a director, his approach to telling a story, he was very experimental. You know, you could tell that he was not just doing what everybody else did. He wanted to see what he could do with a cartoon and with a story. and that made his stuff stand out. Anyway, so yeah, there are certain animators that are extremely. I see one of the drawings up there that one of my favorite animators for the Melendez Studios was Bill Littlejohn, and that's not the drawing, that one yet. The one of Snoopy with the hose. This is one of Littlejohn's scenes. And one of the reasons that I like his work so much is because, number one, the action is so fluid, and the drawing, you can see, even in a single drawing, that the movement within the drawing is very fluid. Interestingly enough, I think that it took a while before Charles Schulz really grew to like Littlejohn's work, but because he didn't always draw the character exactly the way Schulz drew it. But he would push it, you know, he would, especially with Snoopy, he would really stretch him out. And I have a scene right here that was taken from one of Littlejohn's, and again, it's one of those long pans.
Yes.
And you can see how distorted the character gets.
Yep.
In that drawing. You know, it's just really wild and elastic. So when somebody works like that, you get to recognizing their style. And I hope that answers.
No, it did. And so we've got another question. Again, if you would like to come on screen with L3, just raise your hand. We'll bring you into the on-screen part, and then you can ask your question in person. We do have another question from Bruce, who asks, what drew you to the Peanuts characters? Well, oddly enough, I used to, I have a whole collection of the books that Schulz drew way back when I was a kid, and I grew up with them, as did my brother and sister. I mean, all three of us, you know, we would share the books and laugh at these cartoons, and you know, we all had our favorite characters, and like I said, Linus was my favorite character. So when I was in high school, I heard about the Christmas show coming on TV, and you know, so the three of us were anxiously awaiting to see the show, and it's been our favorite Christmas show ever since. So to follow up on that, Madison has a question. Madison, that you could just come on screen. So Madison has a question.
Hi, Madison.
You should probably just turn her camera on and ask, but I'll give her 3 seconds to just do that, because I think it's a great question, and it follows up even on kind of the Bill Littlejohn comment that you made, where Charles was like, it took him a bit to kind of, you know, jive with what Bill was putting down, you know, because it's a bit different from what he was doing. So when Bill would push that, so seeing as Madison still hasn't turned on her camera, because she could just ask this question right now, because I could see her in the panelist view. The question is, when did you feel like you clicked with the Schulz and Melendez in creating these characters when you were animating? Like when did it feel like it was like, we got this down and you guys hit that rhythm?
Oh, that's interesting, because yeah, when I started, well, there are two things about the working as an animator, especially in those days. It was seasonal work a lot of the times. You'd get a job, and you'd work until the film was finished, and then you'd have to go look for work again. So that sort of situation doesn't instill a great deal of confidence in you until maybe you've been hired a dozen or more times.
Really? A dozen or more?
Well, like I said, you're constantly moving from one job to the next.
Wow.
So yeah, I've worked at a lot of studios, but I will say that the work that I did at Melendez, or the job that I had with Melendez, off and on, was the longest employment I've had of any, and probably the most enjoyable, because he kept it a small studio. I know I'm getting away from the answer to your question. I'll go back.
No. Continue that thought.
Okay, he kept it a small studio, so people say, well, it was like a family. Well, it really was. I mean, there was just a handful of people. They all knew each other. They all had their own quirks and characters, and it was very warm and friendly. And even though I didn't feel real confident in my ability to do the job, I did feel like the people accepted me and were treating me in a friendly way. Eventually, actually, it was during a short period where I worked somewhere else, and then came back to work for Bill Melendez Studios. While I was working at this other job, which was at night, there were, I was getting older, and there were a lot of younger people working with me, and one of them looked over at me and he said, how did you learn to draw so fast? And I thought, geez, I'm drawing fast. And I began to realize that, after years of doing this, that I was getting better at it and all of that. So when I went back to work with Bill, I had a little more confidence, and it was not long after that he made me an animator and eventually a director.
I think it's important, especially, we have a lot of young creatives that watch these, which I think is fantastic because they get a chance to hear from the guys that are doing this and have done this for, a long time and successfully for a long time. And, the advice, it's always sage advice on these things. And what I appreciate about what you said was there's a confidence, not a cockiness, but a confidence in when all right, I can do this. And if you've got the talent, you're not being cocky because you're not saying I'm better than everybody else, I'm going to bury everybody else, but you have that confidence to be like, even if it's not working the way you are watching it at first, and maybe there's a deadline to hit, you have the confidence to know that you're going to work this out and you're going to get it done. And I love that. And I've heard it from you, I've heard it from a couple of others, and it's always good to reinforce, really, for anybody. Is that confidence in the fact that you can do this, and look at what happens when you instead of being timid toward it, you go right at it, and then you end up becoming an Emmy-winning director. So
plus I will say that working with some people that it doesn't take any brains to realize they're so much better than these guys are just really amazing artists, and it keeps you humble. So, on the other hand, if one of them gives you a compliment, suddenly it makes you feel that much better. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a point to you surround yourself with better people, you'll get better yourself. Yeah. So and then to get a compliment, you're right, and then you get all all the warm and fuzzies, and then you go tax them. So what I wanted to do was show, I love the process stuff. I think this segues I love Flying Ace. It's always been, it's probably the favorite Snoopy for me, right? And I love it. I love the everything he does with the Red Baron. I love aviation. I'm a huge aviation fan. So I wanted to show, we hinted a little bit at the dogfight, but I wanted to show a couple of pieces, you know, in some process and what happens, and specifically with the dogfight. Scott, if we can take 4A. So, you know, explain a little, you know, you showed like that whole, everything that you were kind of putting in, you're like, man, you know, and this kind of goes back to that earlier question of like, how are you picking which key moments for these things? And this is, it's, again, it's my favorite, it's probably my all-time favorite version of Snoopy is the flying ace Snoopy. And I love what you do with it, because I think you capture everything so well. So once you get to this piece, and then we'll show the in 4B, and then we can show the final. So Scott, if you want to show the full color, what is that about? I mean, yes, like how, as a kid, as an adult, I still daydream, you know, and I can, yeah, I would put on the goggles and sit on a dog house, and yeah, I would imagine that I was this character. So what is it about flying ace really, you know, and getting these sequences down that you're looking for when you're creating something like this wonderful piece?
Well, you know, it was difficult. I started out thinking this is an incredible challenge, because, you know, it's almost everybody's favorite moment in the whole Charles Schulz lexicon of the Peanuts characters, and it's Snoopy fighting the Red Baron.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, again, this sequence was animated by Bill Littlejohn, my favorite animator, and it's got so much character in it. You know, so many different expressions and action, and you know, there's a lot going on. One interesting story was that a pilot who was a big fan of you know, these old Sopwith Camel planes from World War I. He commented to, I think, Charles Schulz, that after seeing this clip of film, that all of the action that Snoopy was doing was actually true to what a pilot would be doing in order to fly one of those planes. And I don't know what all those things were, but you know, it had to do with, you know, what he was doing with his arms and his legs, and all that business. But for me, it was really just, as you said, picking out those key poses that tell the story. And it's really all about telling the story. Having to narrow it down to 3 poses for the painted version,
right,
was just painful.
Oh, so, I bet.
You know, the first one is, of course, him, you know, brazenly fighting or shooting after the Red Baron, who apparently he's missed, and so he sort of gives the camera this look like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. And sure enough, the Baron comes up behind him, and the bullets fly. Well,
I got it. Ann and Rod posted a comment. They have this piece and they absolutely love it. This is one of my all-time favorites that you've done, which is hard to rank because there are numerous favorites.
Well, thanks.
But being as that is my favorite, and I know it's a lot of people's favorite, but it just, I love aviation, I love Snoopy, I love the flying ace, I love World War I flying planes. Yeah. That, like what you captured in that scene, and you know, I think it's, you know, as you mentioned, it's when you have, and it's, I go back to kind of what Chuck would say too about Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. You could have an infinite amount of things go on, but what happens if, you know, you put rules around things, and then you have to, you know, you have to be creative within these confines. And in this case, it's how can you tell a story in as few frames as possible? That is not an easy thing to do. So I salute you, sir, because you seem, oh wait, oh,
it's not easy to do, as you can see.
Oh,
that is pages and pages.
That is a glorious stack of pages.
Yeah. So
I love it. Well, so we're as we get into some things tonight, we do have a treat or two as we follow through. We're going to get into kind of the creation of background layouts for key scenes. And last time you melted the screen because you went ahead and you animated a Snoopy walk cycle, and everybody went crazy. I know that because I was getting messages, text, Instagram, direct messages on this thing, and I'm in the point of melting down myself watching you do this and geeking out. So we may have a little sequel to our drawing episode with the legendary Larry Leichliter coming up here very shortly. Sure. And what I wanted to get into also, and it's, you show it in the dogfight scene, where you're creating these background layouts for like key things that are happening. So you did it beautifully in the first one, and then in the charge piece with the leaves, like the background's glorious. Everything complements what's going on. It doesn't overtake the main action of the piece. So we have that lovable moment, or that humorous moment, and then it's all complemented like brilliantly. So when you're taking, like, talk me through the process of creating a great background, like you're creating this background for these layouts of these key scenes, like how for as simple as it can seem, it's actually kind of hard because you can mess it up pretty quickly. So take me through the process on that.
Yeah, it's it's funny you would mention that, because one of the things that inspired me to do some of the additional drawings, the storyboards and stuff like that, was a display that Sandy had come up with of three panels. One was the little storyboard panel, and then a framed image of the layout drawing, and then the final piece of artwork. And you could see, the storyboard panel told the story very simply. There was a little cabin in the woods, and Charlie Brown was pulling his sled, I think, down a snow-covered path. And then it was given to a layout artist who had not worked at our studio before. And again, everybody has their own style. He had his own style. It was beautiful what he drew. But it was a very rendered piece, almost Norman Rockwellish. The detail in the pine trees and the snow on the trees, and the winding path with the rocks and the log cabin and stuff like that. And this beautiful layout then went to the background artist, who has been working with Bill from the very beginning of the show, and definitely had the feel for what constituted Schultz's style and what was going too far and what was needed. So the final background didn't look anything like the layout, but it captured the essence of what the layout artist had done, and simplified it in a way that only Schultz could do, or Schultz and Dean Spilly, I should say, because Dean was the background artist on that piece. So, but seeing those three stages made me realize that it's kind of interesting seeing the process, and I thought maybe some of the rest of the people, some of you guys, would like to see that as well.
Let's do it.
So that's what we've been doing.
Well, that was my kick to, could we see the he's your dog? So so we can actually see it in action and look at what you took off. Scott, that is number one.
It's in there.
He's
I
your
believe
dog.
in this one, we had a cell
9A.
of Snoopy dressed up in his Flying Ace costume, leaning against Schroeder's piano while Schroeder is playing, and this is all we had. It's on the screen, so it's a choice piece as far as that moment in the show, but that's all we had. We didn't have Schroeder, we didn't have the background or the piano or any of that. You could put that against a color card background and frame it, and people would look at it and say, that's really neat, but what is it? And so we sort of thought that it would be, it would take it a step further to recreate the background and add all of the elements that are missing, but just keep it as a simple line drawing, as it would have been, say, in a layout. And then you could place the cell against that, and you would see the complete scene, highlighting the cell that you have there.
I love that piece. Again, favorite version. Thank you very much. So there's what I wanted it to is you don't see the mustache that often. However, Scott, if you can take 10A, and then I wanted to ask you, Larry, about like, can you walk us through the original backgrounds that you created for specifically?
Even more than the background, first I want to tell you a little about the disguise, because that's what this is. This is a moment where Snoopy has escaped the horrors of life away from Charlie, because Charlie sent him off to dog training or finishing school or something like that, and he strayed off and got caught by some girl who put him to work washing dishes and mopping the floor and cleaning up and just all sorts of rigors. He escaped her clutches and disguised himself so he could make it home without being caught. And this disguise is kind of an homage, partly to Bill and also partly to Vince Guaraldi, both of who had a rather long handlebar mustache. And so most of us, when we see a big mustache like that, we think of Bill.
That's awesome.
So here's Snoopy in his Flying Ace costume, behind enemy lines and wearing a disguise. And he's jumping up and clicking his heels because he's happy to be home. So again, what we do is we find the exact frame of film that came from, and then having discovered where that is in the story, I just then try to recreate the background that it goes with, and it's a nighttime scene with the moon in the sky, and the trees and grass and all of that framing him, and he's happy as can be.
I love it. It's hilarious. I can't grow a mustache like that, which makes me slightly envious. But it's okay. So you get to create, these wonderful scenes, and we were watching you creating these backgrounds and scenes to put together. Can you take us a bit through in these backgrounds that you've created for the pieces that we've seen, like over the years? Some of your favorites, like that. I'm not going to say that. We're not going to say favorites.
Well, I do have favorites, and I don't mind saying that one of the recent ones that we did was my request. I wanted to sort of represent the moment at the beginning of the Christmas show where all of the kids are on the pond skating. I love that piece of music, and I love that moment in the scene. in the film where we see everybody skating on a pond. Again, just like jumping in a leaf pile, skating on a frozen pond just is evocative of winter and Christmas time and that sort of thing. And it's not something that I experienced as a kid, but is, just stands out in my mind as something that should have been a part of my childhood.
But Scott, can you bring out number 3, please? Image 3. I've done this. I've done the skating thing on ice, and where they put up the red flag or the green flag. And,
yeah, I'm so envious.
And I remember as a kid, there was I was born in Arkansas, then it was Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and then up to Illinois. And the apartment that we lived in when I was younger up there, like not 10 years old, 11 years old, they had a pond, by the apartment complex, and it would freeze over.
Yeah.
And then everybody would go out and skate. And that was my first opportunity to skate out on pond ice, so that what you have in there in that scene, at a couple of apartment buildings, and I'm in, that's exactly what I did. So I love it. You do such a wonderful job of composing, backgrounds that just complement what goes on and enhances, that moment that you've created with characters so beautifully.
I wouldn't want to be the kid on the end of the line.
You don't want to be the whip. No.
Yeah, right.
End of the whip. Because let me tell you, momentum is a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Momentum is a thing. Now, when we're talking about kind of like favorites and things that really, like, you've produced an amazing array of artwork, and not only as animating and directing and doing that, but just even in the gallery atmosphere and things that we can all collect and hang on our walls and cherish for a lifetime. Are there things for you, like when you're collecting, I know there is for me, there's stuff that I'm like, gotta have that, or something that somebody gives you, that like maybe it was a part of your childhood and or something that you grew up with that you just admired. And I asked that question because, I always find it fascinating for creatives who do this, for a living and who are able to do these things and really enjoy it. They get a biggest kick out of receiving some of these things because they geek out over other people. Like I geek out over you, right? So when you're geeking out over someone like Mark O'Hare, right? Yeah. You brought that up in pre-production, and I'm like, yes, right. I love these stuff because it's just so, like Bill Littlejohn is another one. I love your just admiration, and you light up like a kid at Christmas, with his stuff, and it's just so cool. So can you share with our audience this evening, like the we're gonna nerd out for a minute, and you're like this thing, Mark O'Hare, Nickelodeon. You take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. I have worked as I said, at a bunch of other studios besides Phil Melendez, and one of them I had the opportunity of meeting an artist who drew a comic strip called Citizen Dog, and his name was Mark O'Hare, and he's a marvelous artist. He really is, and he's a wonderful cartoonist. And he asked me to help him work on a pilot that he had written about a cat who was a detective. The odd thing about him was that he worked in the canine corps of the local police department. So he was kind of a cat out of water, so to speak. And one of my favorite scenes, and it was just an aside, it had very little to do with the story, but was at the beginning of the show. He's in bed with his owner. Now, there's nothing unusual about, having your pet in bed with you, but when he then gets dressed and puts on a hat and tie and goes to work. And enough said, that's all there was to it, but it brings up just an oddness to Mark's sense of humor. And it was definitely in that respect an adult cartoon.
Yes.
So, but I later had an opportunity to work with Mark again on another show, and you know, we worked for an entire season. As I said, this is the kind of work where, you know, you work on a show, then you put your portfolio together and you go looking for a job at the next opportunity. But after working with Mark on a show called The Mighty Bee, he gave me one of his comic strips from Citizen Dog, which is this one.
That's awesome. Well, you know, and it's I love, again, we kind of we have similar nerding out levels when it comes to these things, and I love your appreciation just for, I find that most of us who, you know, are in the field, we all nerd out on other people's stuff. So to have something like, I've got stuff all over the place, and it's just it's always inspiring to me. And I think too, what's even a level up on what you have there, these are personal pieces from somebody, you know, that they've given to you on somebody that you greatly respect, which is
Right.
fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know, so as I'm going through again, fall is going to be an image for me that will hang on the wall of one of your lovely pieces, because I do not deal with fall down here anymore. Leaves get a little crispy and they fall to the ground, and a week later they grow back. Just,
yeah.
So there are, you know, there's, as we get into this process of things, are there projects, and I'm not going to say necessarily like that you got to spill beans on stuff, right? But like, are there projects, I'll take it in a different direction, in advice projects that you've done, like, is there sage advice, because we brought that up earlier, on something that really, you know, it stuck with you and it didn't take long to stick? So like, maybe what was a piece of advice that you got throughout your career at whatever point that you picked up quickly and retained, and maybe a piece of advice that you're still working at? Because I could tell you I have a laundry list of advice that I'm still working on.
Yeah.
So like, what was that piece of advice that just it really stuck instantly?
Well, there's a couple of them that come to mind, but like you say, there's a long list of things that I remember that people have told me that I'm still working on. But the two that I think sort of gave me the direction I needed at the time. One was from a very sympathetic person, and one was from a maybe not so sympathetic person. The not so sympathetic one was someone who looked at the way I was drawing Peppermint Patty's hair, and he said, "You're not drawing it right." And I said, "What do you mean? It looks just like the way Charles Schultz draws it." He said, "No," he says, "you're not giving it any weight." And I didn't know what he meant at first until I realized that what he was saying was that depending upon how you angle the pencil and how much pressure you put on the pencil as you're drawing the line, you can make the line thin or thick. And if you make it a little bit thicker at the curve at the bottom of the hair where it's hanging, and then quickly let up so that it tapers to a point, you have a nice thin line that's being pulled by the weight of the hair, and the bulk of the weight is at the bottom, and then it, you know, lets up to finish it to a nice pointy finish. And it's a small thing, but it changes the way you draw every line in your drawing at that point. It makes you think about how you're making your lines. So that was one thing. And the other was from Don Lusk, who I love talking to, and I had always hoped that he would, mentor me, but never had the opportunity, except that he did tell me once in a long conversation that we had that his favorite approach to animating was to throw the characters off balance. Now, I may have said this in an earlier conversation that we've had, but it was that important to me, and he would demonstrate. He would show me a piece of work that he was working on at the time, where you take the character and he's standing in a very relaxed pose, and then either by beginning to walk or by being pushed off balance or something would change his weight so that he was off balance, and he had to move to gather himself to catch his balance, and that would propel him into the next pose, and on, and just that whole concept of a character being off balance in order to propel him into motion gave me an added element of animation.
So that is a great lead into a question that I'm now going to say that, Madison, you just need to turn your camera. Like, I love the camera and I love a microphone. Okay. I could do this all day and it could just be me asking L3 the questions, but let's kind of share the surround. Madison has no excuse to not turn on her camera and ask you this question, because it dovetails right in after what you said. Look at that. There she is.
Hi, Madison.
All right, Madison, why don't you ask Larry your question?
Okay, I'll take it over. So which Peanuts character is the hardest to animate? Because that's a big question.
The hardest to animate. Well, and I really have to think about this because most of them all look alike. And I don't mean that they literally look alike, but there's basically two formulas or two shapes that the human characters have. There's Linus and Schroeder that have that sort of dished out face, and then there's Charlie and Peppermint Patty and those guys that have the pretty round face. But other than that, their proportions are about the same, the short legs and the big head and stuff like that. So once you've kind of got the knack for one of them, you kind of have it for all of them. The hair can be a problem if it's like spiky hair or it's really curly hair. That's gonna like do things when you're moving it. And there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to accept the fact that that's what's going to happen. Peppermint Patty and Eudora and other characters that have long hair, that's actually kind of fun because, you have sort of overlapping action with the hair and, some wave flowing kind of stuff that's adds something to the animation, and it's fun to watch. I would say, in a way, Snoopy, while I wouldn't say he's the hardest to animate, although now that I think about it, his head shape has so many variables depending upon what position he's in. You've all seen his happy dance where his head's straight up in the air and he looks like this long flute of champagne or something, which is so different from his sort of peanut shaped head that he normally has. But then there's the pose where he's looking straight at you, and I had hang on, I think no, oh well. But it looks like this. I told you my rough drawings are really ugly. Anyway, so yeah, I would find him difficult, if only for that reason. But add to it that he is such a lively character, and you know, the really great animators have done some amazing things with his antics, that that it's a challenge, you know, to meet up to that, you know, do that kind of work. So yeah, I guess in the end I would say Snoopy's the hardest in that respect.
Watching you animate Snoopy last time didn't look, I mean, you get a full, holy
Well,
cow.
I did a lot of preparation.
You did very good. So Madison, thank you very much for coming on screen. And
Yeah,
anybody else would like to come on screen, ask Larry a question, or maybe just a comment to Larry. I'm not going to call you Larry. Larry's, that doesn't stand up to the legendary Larry Leichliter status, but Sir Larry, that also works. Now, did you have something in mind for maybe a little?
Yeah. I was have my desk set up, and I was going to do a demonstration of drawing Snoopy on all fours,
All right, so
helping Charlie make a pile of leaves.
So let's go to Larry's overhead cam. Go ahead and take it away,
Okay.
Larry. Drawing table, and then when we
I'm
come
gonna
back,
change the lights a bit.
yeah, go right ahead. Joel had a question. We're gonna come to him after you draw, because I saw his hand pop up and then come back down. So we're gonna after Larry dazzles us with some pencil magic on that glorious paper, we're gonna go to Joel with a question.
Okay. How's that look? That look okay?
So
First of all,
go ahead.
here's the leaf.
So as you're drawing this, we've got, for one, Joel, you're gonna have to come on camera and do it. I'm gonna make you. You're gonna have to ask that question in person. For Michael Green, asked, because this is a great question while you're doing what you're doing right now. When animating a character, what is the biggest piece of advice you would have for trying to show a character's personality? Yeah, loaded question.
Yeah. No, but it's, as an animator, that's really a good question, because it's one of the first things that you really want to take into consideration. But it's a tough question to answer, because it really comes down to the same sort of things that an actor asks of himself and of the writer of the role that he's playing. And that is, what's his motivation? What makes him do what he's doing? And how does he show that in his action? So a lot of it is, if he's got some kind of attitude or way of standing or carrying himself when he walks, that shows his personality. Another is possibly if there's some physical characteristic to his movement that says something about his personality, that is kind of like a double entendre or written between the lines, if you know what I mean. It's you really kind of have to look at the big picture about who he is and what his role is in doing what he's doing. Does he walk up to a door and knock on it timidly, or does he walk up with a cane and rap on the door with his cane. And it's there are all sorts of things that people do to convey who they are, and those are the things that you want to explore as an animator. It's as I said, it's very much like being an actor and looking at a script and saying, who is this character? So
I think that, yeah, and I totally agree. And I would maybe to expand a tiny bit, would you say you brought up the whole, you're an actor with a pencil, whether it's a digital pencil or a physical pencil, but really, kind of being an observer of everything around you, and maybe the personalities of, obviously you see a script, what a character's personality is written as, but then to see that played out, and to be a student of like real life action, whether it's on film or just out in the public, and just being an observer of that and translating those actions into what would make sense in a personality.
Absolutely. One of my favorite artists, and I'm blanking out on his name, but it'll come to me in a minute, and you probably already know who I'm talking about. He used to illustrate for the theater, and he would go to the theater and watch the play, and he kept a pencil and paper in his pocket, and he would draw while he was watching the play, but he would draw with his hand in his pocket, which I have not been able to perfect, but one of these days.
Well, we have to have something to work on, right?
Yeah, right.
You need your own channel like Bob Ross, and then it can, like Happy Little Trees, right? And
Yeah.
I'll work a camera for you if you want, and then you just do your thing, and we'll make t-shirts with your likeness on it and stuff like that. I will gladly wear one. That looks awesome. Well, Larry, I'm gonna give the applause on behalf of the audience, who I'm sure is applauding right now. I love it when you do that stuff. It's like magic. You sit there and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm just staring at you draw, and it's magic coming to life on paper. I lose myself in that stuff sometimes, where I just sit there and they're like, hey, you should probably ask him a question. I'm like, right, just give me a second. Drawing.
I regret that I don't have the knack for talking while I'm drawing that some people have, because I would love to explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it, because there are a lot of thoughts that are going on, even on a drawing as simple as this.
Well, I love it, and I love that you did that, because when you said, you're like, well, I could draw some. Yes, put that in. Let's make sure we're set up. So I want to bring, we have another on-screen question. Joel, sure. Come on in, Joel.
Hi, Joel.
It's almost like Brady Bunch squares. Go ahead, Joel. Your volume's off, buddy. You got to unmute yourself. Hold on, Joel.
Okay. I think everybody could hear me now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, Larry, I have to tell you that was so amazing what you just did with Snoopy. When Madison was asking you what the hardest question, what the hardest character was, I think Snoopy got to be the hardest character, because he has so many personalities.
Right.
And any particular moment, he just changes into all different personas, and to get it down where where Charles Schultz and Bill Melendez were happy with the final results has got to be ecstatic.
Yeah, I love the scene where Schroeder's playing the piano, and he's switching back and forth between happy marching tunes and
Mhm.
laments, and Snoopy is like, he's like this, and then he's like crying, and he can't help himself, because he's motivated by the music.
Yeah, which leads me into the question, which is, how did it feel to actually co-direct with Bill Melendez the last Peanut specials?
Yeah, there were a couple that we did before he really just sort of turned me loose, and it was, well, the first one I think I was sweating bullets because it was the first time that we sent work to an overseas studio, and he wanted me to help give the overseas animators direction on how to handle the characters. And it was a big responsibility, and I was very honored and rather frightened by the responsibility. So, but it ended up okay, and then we did another one, and that was even better, and it just got to be more and more fun.
Sure. So how much input did Bill give you when you were co-directing with him? Because usually with different, when you have a couple of directors working on a particular project, whether it's a short or whether or not it's a fully, animated film, one has the timing, one has the characters. What did you actually, kind of do after the initial one?
Well, I had years of studying not only Bill Melendez's timing, but all of the other animators that worked at the studio, and I had my favorites, but I also realized which worked best with what situations. But to answer your question, Bill had his input from the very start on every minute of it. He would come in and he would make drawings constantly, having to do with each of the scenes that we were working on. And it wasn't so much that he was plotting out a scene, doing storyboards or layouts or any of that. He was actually doing those key moments that had the distillation of the character or the essence of the action or whatever it was that he felt was important not to miss out on in that particular moment in the picture. And he would just be throwing these constantly at me all the time.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I wanted to bring up before, we just need to hang out at some point in person. I mean, if you're cool with that, I'm cool with that. I'll come out to you. You can, I'll make the trip.
All right.
Bring
your warm clothes. It's pretty cold here.
I don't think my jacket's gonna cut it. What's funny is when we moved down here, we literally got rid of all of it. I think I have one jacket that might work. I don't have any gloves. I don't have a hat. I mean, so I'll make sure to get something in the airport. What I wanted to do was we have all this. First of all, thank you everyone for joining and popping in tonight. If you want to get on screen with Larry, we still have time. So just raise your hand and we'll bring you on. You can interact with L3, you and the screen.
Even just to say hi.
Just to say hi, right? You want to make a comment? You didn't have a question. You want to make a comment? Rod wants to come on because he has that piece that he loves, and I'm just saying I'm not poking the bear, Rod. But if you want to come on and say hello, that would be totally fine. So what an amazing array of artwork tonight. And for one I've got we're just going to call this the three. All right. 3 questions. Your L3 will do 3 questions at the end of the night, random stuff that I've got questions on.
Mhm.
And what I wanted to start was first question of the 3. 1, are you going to go jump in a pile of leaves? Now that we've gotten through this, you've got some stuff raking up. Even if it's just a short fall or something, are you going to do it now?
I'll think about it. We've definitely got a lot of leaves here.
Yes.
I haven't raked them all up yet.
There you go. All right. So just one big pile, in you go. 2, I listen to all kinds of different music, and I have to have multiple things going on at once. And my wife, my kids pick up the same habit. So I've got a movie or a show on, I've got music playing, I got something else going, right? And I can pay attention to all that stuff and not pay attention to it, if that makes any sense. So
absolutely it does.
How many things can you have going on at once? Music, TV, whatever. And then the question to that is, like, what is your go-to? So as an example, my go-to when I'm buried in where I need a movie on or some music or something, I play Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original 3 Star Wars, and Captain America, the First Avenger. I can play that over and over again just to have it on. And then I've got music. So is there a go-to music for you that just you turn it on and it puts you right in? Or is there a movie that you can play a billion times, but you just kind of want to have it on while you're working?
Yeah, that's good. I always was baffled by Bernie Groover, who was a layout, again, my favorite layout artist for the studio. Because he had his television on all the time while he was working, and I could not figure out how he could work and have a television going at the same time. I'm one of those people who, if you and I went to a bar to have a drink, I would have to position myself with my back to the TV screen, because the bar always has 2 or 3 TV screens with ball games going. And I cannot take my eyes off a moving picture. It's just one of those things. So no, I'm afraid the movie is out, although I do watch a lot of them. And if I take a break, I will probably pull up, there's a website that has independent animation and various short clips of cartoons that people are doing these days. And I like looking at that a lot. So that's as close as I can come to that. But as far as music, yes, I have music going all the time, to my wife's consternation, because I think I like listening to it a lot more than she does. Although we do agree on what kind of music we like. We both like a lot of different kinds of music. My go-to music, and this has only been in maybe the last, 5-6 years, is slack key guitar, Hawaiian slack key guitar music. And it's there are several guitarists that I'm particularly fond of, but the name that stands out above the rest that I can remember is an older gentleman named Cyril Hahinui. And the history of slack key guitar is, if I can do justice to it, Hawaiians had, I'm getting it confused with ukuleles, but anyway, they would hear guitar music from cowboys that were coming to help with the ranching in Hawaii, and so they learned to play guitar from listening to these guys, but then they would retune the guitar to play it the way they wanted to play the kind of notes that they wanted. And to my best understanding, they were mostly fond of yeah, I'm getting out of my depth here, but anyway,
So interest. So the,
Black key guitar music. It's very melodic and not a lot of dissonance in it, and you know, it's very relaxing.
I'll have to look that up.
Mm.
So as we go for the final question and we wrap this evening, so I'll ask you this final question and we're going to wrap up for tonight. In the shortest, or not the shortest film, but like you mentioned the animation. So what is a current, something in the last couple of years, piece of animation, like either an animated short or an animated feature film that you were like, love that, love it?
Oh yeah. I would have to say this came out, I don't know, now it's maybe a year or two ago, a Christmas cartoon called Klaus.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it was made by a fellow from Spain who, you know, it was an arduous process. You know, he had artists helping him, but it was, you know, to do a feature film is a big job. And it wasn't until he partnered with Netflix, I believe,
Yeah.
and got the funding to really sort of amp up to the next level, to finish the job with the degree of perfection that he started out with. And it's amazing if you look at it. It's hand-drawn animation, you know, probably supplemented a little with some computer work, but it's
Not much.
it's just absolutely fantastic.
All right, well, I'm gonna put that on the list. As I would assume we're coming up to like Christmas season. This is Christmas film.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be there. And
Just check.
yeah, it's a delightful story as well.
Cool. All right. Well, I have that on the list, and Hawaii Slack Key Guitar. So
Okay.
I'm going to check that out, and then we will reconvene. So as we wrap tonight, Larry, you know, I've had the great pleasure of getting to know you now over several different shows, and every single time it just keeps getting better. And the more I get to know you about you, just the more I'm infatuated with you, is in a good way. Your wife doesn't have to worry about anything, neither does mine. You know, infatuated, just you as a person, as a creative. You're absolutely a fascinating individual, and I think it's so important to have these shows, you know, to where we can see the creative behind all these things, you know, and you reaffirm my good faith in wonderful creatives that I admire, that are really awesome people.
Well,
So-
all of that back at you, Ben, because I know the kind of work you do, and it's really amazing.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Well, I'm looking forward to like hanging out in person here, hopefully someday soon. If people are looking, you can see the tag at the bottom there, chuckjonescatalog.com. We have Peanuts limited edition art. If you go on the chuckjonescatalog.com site, you'll be able to see it there in alphabetical order. Larry has unveiled amazing pieces tonight, including the world premiere of The Charge, our autumn hero. So I love this. We're gonna one day, Larry, it's gonna be into the leaf pile. So
Yeah.
I'll come out and rake them for you if you want. I'll rake the pile, you jump in, I'll rake them again. I have no problem with that. Parting words for the audience tonight.
Yeah,
you, sir.
just don't put a whoopee cushion in the pile of leaves, okay?
Yeah, it'd be like, or we'll say there's a whoopee cushion, and it was just like, no, it was there. We'll find it. Don't worry. So, well, hey, man, what a pleasure. Again, thank you to everybody for joining us tonight for this. It's always insightful. You always have great stories, and then obviously the amazing artwork. Again, you're just a super cool guy. So we want to thank you. Thank you, Sandy, for all of that she does as well. We appreciate that. And Scott Ryder, Scott Dickin, Dawn, Madison, Lisa, everybody on the team, Mike, Joel, I could go down the list, Carol, Tashi, Mike, Michael. I mean, we got everybody. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you for everybody at the Chuck Jones Gallery. Larry, I'm looking forward to round 4 when I can't say L3 cubed. It's going to have to be L3 to the 4th power. But maybe that one's done. Maybe that one's done in person and we figure that out.
I hope so. That'd be great.
Yes. Awesome. Well, everybody have a great and wonderful night, and we will see you next time for the very next Chuck Jones Creative Side Chat.
All
Good night,
right.
everybody.
Thanks to all of you.
Dude, you're awesome.